greenfield development, right? They've got 10 square miles that they can build. So a situation like that, parking's not as big of a deal. Everybody can be a 2-car household. It's fine. Everybody's going to be in their own separate house. But if you're talking about building something in downtown Salt Lake City, or you're talking about the prison redevelopment project, right? That's out there, space is at a premium. And so it's talking about, okay, so how do you make it so that everybody can get to and from where they want to go without dedicating huge amounts of time and resource to parking, to traffic management? How do we make it so that this 2-car household can be a 1-car household because of the services that are available? This is really where Siemens plays a huge role. I particularly am super interested in smart energy, right? So when I think of smart energy, I think of distributed energy systems, microgrids, battery storage, those kind of things that really play into resiliency of a development or a city. And so I don't know I want to talk a little bit about microgrids. So Siemens has deployed a couple of projects, one of which was, it was in New York, where all these people everybody's got solar panels, everybody's got whatever, they're generating their own energy, but then it's going back into the grid, they're selling it back to the utility, and then somebody else that may well be their next door neighbor is buying it back from the utility. And so just from an economic standpoint, right, there's a middleman that doesn't necessarily have to be there. And then also from just a sustainability standpoint, there's line losses. You lose some of that energy anytime it has to go out into the grid and then back in from the grid. On-site generation is one thing, on-site storage is another. I know there's probably a lot of people in this room that have solar panels on their house, right? And it's great, and you have this excess energy, but again, you've got to take it out to the grid. If there's on-site battery storage, which I really like to do on my house. I don't think it's really economically viable yet on the individual level, but if you can store that energy on site, you're generating energy all day. Maybe you're not home, so you're really not using it, but then when you get home, AC kicks on, you start cooking, you whatever, you can use the energy you generated as opposed to having to kick it back out the grid, suck it back from the grid later. And then smart buildings. So Siemens does a ton of smart buildings, right? So we've made some recent acquisitions, but from a user interface standpoint, from a whether it's the HVAC control, whether it's the lighting control, whether it's occupancy, all that sort of stuff, and how that interacts and how you can turn a smart building and then deploy some of those same technologies, some of those same thoughts into a smart city or a smart development. This is something that Peter and I talked a little bit about before with those networks, thinking about, okay, it's all about use cases, and so it sounds like Ignite was trying to decide, okay, do we go out and we build these networks, or do we figure out what the use cases are and then roll those out so that everybody comes in and they build their own networks. There's a market driver behind it, which is obviously going to build things out a lot quicker than it would if somebody was just trying to take it all from the other end. And so we've talked about a little, it sounds like Utopia already has a model that's very similar to this, where you get in these developments, build their own infrastructure from a network standpoint, whether it's fiber, it's going to be fiber. But so they own that infrastructure, and then the ISPs come in and you have your choice, right? And the analogy that I heard for that I was sharing with Peter earlier was, so it's the way that your internet currently works today is, imagine if the Postal Service and UPS and FedEx, they all had to build their own roads to deliver packages to your house, right? That's kind of how it works now. There are all these separate networks that somebody has deployed time, effort, resources, materials, whatever it is, to deploy these networks, that it's an unnecessary expense, and we're all paying that expense, right? That eventually that money comes out of our pockets. Other parts of this: real-time utility monitoring and billing, digital displays. It's another huge impact that we can have on sustainability. I don't know about you guys. I'm a nerd about this stuff, so I have it's a Nest thermostat in my house, right? And I probably look at it every other day to see, okay, how many hours did did I run my heating or my air conditioning today? Or I'm looking at my water bill. There are studies that are out there that just having that visibility day to day into what you're doing can have the biggest impact on your behaviors and on conservation at an individual level. And so some of that stuff, if there's a display in your house that says, hey, you know, it's a screen that says, hey, yesterday you were 20% over whatever, we've normalized that for weather conditions, and it's like, I gotta yell at my kids again for adjusting the thermostat, right? Or, you know, but along all those things, if you just see your bill at the end of the month, you can't see where you could have made an impact, but if you can see it daily, or real-time information, it can make a lot of difference in how people interact with their own systems within their homes. This is one, I think I told you guys, there are things that I know a lot about. This one I don't know as much about. But a lot of this stuff that's, again, how people are interacting with their space. So whether it's access to spaces, whether it's using some of those joint resources, so especially if you're in development where space is at premium, it's like, okay, you want to be able to, you're in a house that's 12 or 1,500, a living space is 12 or 1,500 square feet, so 2,500, and the way that you can get people to do that is because they have a shared resource they can use, whether it's a movie room, whether it's outdoor space, whether it's whatever, and you can tie all of those things into, you know, an application on your phone that says, hey, I want to schedule this to use this, or I want to see how busy this is at this time, decide whether you're going to use it or not. There's also, we're going to talk about wayfinding, but not really from a visitor wayfinding perspective. It's in another one of these slides. So public safety and security, this is huge. Obviously, there's a huge trend now where I think it's within the last 10 years or something, there are more people in the cities than there are in the suburbs, right? The more people that are in these spaces, the more impact there is if there's an event, if there's something that happens, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's an active shooter, whether it's whatever it is, and being able to make sure that you keep everybody safe in these situations is a huge consideration when you're doing one of these type of developments. So, for instance, one of the projects that we are doing work on currently in Colorado, Sterling Ranch, that I talked about earlier. So there's a component to that where we have smart street lighting that's out there. They all have Bluetooth low energy beacons on them, and it's all set up. So let's say there's let's say somebody has a heart attack. They call an ambulance. All of those lights can be programmed so that all the lights on the way that the ambulance is going to take, they're all going to turn red. Right? The ambulance knows which way to go. Everybody that's driving on the street looks up. The light just turned red. I know I need to pull over. There's something going on. There's an ambulance coming, rather than having to wait for the lights in the rearview mirror. And it can be used for any of those sorts of situations. An active shooter, where kind of a mass notification to the community. They also have built-in speakers in the street lights. Wi-Fi connectivity that's part of the street lights, so that it's a real connected community. There's a lot of those sort of things that you can build in that, from a safety and a convenience standpoint, can make a big difference. So that was kind of